1997 started off as a great year for the New England Patriots. Led by quarterback Drew Bledsoe and legendary coach Bill Parcells, the Patriots had made it all the way to Super Bowl 31. Unfortunately, they lost to Brett Favre's Green Bay Packers, but hey, the future was still bright. They had a Hall of Fame coach, a franchise quarterback, and they had the rest of the 90s to put it all together and bring home the franchise's first championship. Yep, 1997 was going to be a great year for Drew Bledsoe and the Patriots.
No, it wasn't.
Shortly after the Super Bowl, Bill Parcells left the Patriots over a disagreement with owner Robert Kraft. Replacing him was no small feat, as Parcells was a coaching legend. The man tasked with stepping into his shoes would be a relatively unproven coach named Pete Carroll. It was a risk for sure, as Pete hadn't had much success as an NFL coach, but when the new season started, the Patriots went undefeated in their first 4 games. It also helped that the players loved Pete Carroll, because Pete Carroll loved letting them do whatever the hell they wanted. Whereas Parcells was an old school football hardass, Pete had a far softer touch with his players. It came with a price though, as sometimes his softer touch could get taken advantage of, as former Patriot Willie McGinnis described in an episode of the Bill Simmons podcast.
He didn't rule with an iron fist, and I think we had...
And you had a lot of young dudes on that team.
That's the problem.
Did you need an iron fist coach? You probably did.
You know what, they're men, but some guys took advantage of the way, Pete was, and they didn't respect it, and they didn't do what they needed to do.
Pete's permissive attitude is why on Thursday, November 13th, 1997, Drew Bledsoe, backup quarterback Scott Zolak, and offensive lineman Max Lane didn't think it'd be a big deal if they rented a limo to head into Boston and have a good time. They were heading to the Paradise nightclub to see Drew Bledsoe's favorite band, Everclear. They had no way of knowing what the night would bring them. What happens next depends on who you talk to. It is definitely a Rashomon situation, or for those of you not up to date with your Kurosawa films, it's like that episode of It's Always Sunny where they're trying to figure out who got Dee pregnant. Actually, it's a lot more like that, because most people in this story are drunk. What seems to be universally agreed to is that during the concert, Max Lane and Drew Bledsoe dove off the stage and into the crowd below. Amongst the crowd was a 22-year-old college student named Tamika Messier, who was severely injured. She had to have 2 discs in her neck removed and a bone from her hip fused to her spine. As you would expect, she sued Bledsoe and Lane, but she also sued Everclear and the Paradise nightclub for damages related to her injuries. According to Messier, Max Lane told a security guard he had a $1,000 bet with Bledsoe that he can get on stage with the band. This led to Everclear singer Art Alexakis allowing them on stage. During one of their songs, the 330-pound Lane dove onto Messier and landed on her head. Shortly after that, the 235-pound Bledsoe jumped and also landed on her. At this point, Messier felt her body go numb and had to leave the show in an ambulance. In Bledsoe's version of the story, he doesn't deny that there was a stage dive, but more denies that he was responsible for the injuries. He still maintains it was Max Lane who landed on Messier and caused her injuries. Here he is briefly talking about it on Green Light with Chris Long.
Went to an Everclear concert and jumped off the stage and got sued.
Did you land on somebody?
Yeah, well, Max jumped off the stage. He landed on somebody, Max Lane. So, stage diving is for the little 140-pound lead singer. It's not. It's
for 6'5", 240.
Not for, yeah.
When it comes to Everclear, their version denies that they had any responsibility. Their involvement in the lawsuit stemmed from the question of whether or not they instigated the incident or allowed the players on stage. They denied both, saying they not only did not invite them on stage, but how were they supposed to know that they would jump off? It didn't seem like the lawsuit was a favorite topic of theirs, but I did find a 2006 interview with Art Alexakis for Bullseye.com breaking down the incident and expressing sympathy for the victim. It wasn't the first or last time we've been sued by a fan. That's just part of any band. Any kid comes to a show and stage dives or crowd surfs and gets kicked in the head and comes home with a black eye and mom says, "We're going after them," and calls an ambulance chaser. Our insurance settles it out. They ask for $100,000 for a black eye. We give them $2,000 and they say, okay. In this case, this girl has a valid, horrible mishap happen to her. You had these huge football players jumping off a 5-foot stage onto a crowd full of teenage girls, and it seriously damaged this girl for life. In my opinion, she had every right to go after them. Lastly, we have backup quarterback and human equivalent of Surge Scott Zolak's version of events, which calls Everclear's narrative into question. Scott Zolak wasn't named in any lawsuit, but he was there that night and was reported as having been in the mosh pit. I want to pause and briefly mention that I only know the hits, so to me, the idea of an Everclear concert having a mosh pit blows my mind.
Plowing ahead!
In an episode of the Untold Patriot Stories podcast, Zolak claims that the players were friendly with Everclear, and it kind of warned them that if they played Santa Monica, things were going to get rowdy.
We told the band, don't play Santa Monica because someone's going to snap. And that song comes on. Next thing you do, I'm in the mosh pit, and I see Max flying, and I end up grabbing a hold of him, and I get him in the noogie. And we all got passed around, and we're sort of bouncing off it. It's unfortunate someone got hurt that night.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I don't know how that doesn't happen at more of those events with the festivals. And
so I got a couple of points.
We've never spoken to Everclear again.
Following the Paradise nightclub incident, not a lot happened. It was reported, but didn't get a lot of attention. Yet, because 3 days later the story became huge in Boston after Drew Bledsoe played one of the worst games of his career. In a 27-7 loss against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Bledsoe played terribly, and the Boston sports media smelt blood in the water. When the Boston sports media sees an angle to make a story, they are ruthless. Once a narrative is formed around an athlete in New England, it's hard to break. They pounced on the Bledsoe incident and immediately made connections between the quote-unquote mosh pit incident and Bledsoe's poor play. Bledsoe denied that night had anything to do with his bad game, but they weren't having it. They had already made that connection and it was too late to stop it. Reporters continued to make those connections all the way up towards Pete Carroll and his permissive attitude towards his players. Don't get me wrong, they had legitimate reasons to criticize Pete Carroll. While the Patriots had started off 4-0, by the time of that terrible loss against the Bucs, they had lost 4 of their previous 6. While Carroll got it bad, Bledsoe got it worse. A first-round draft pick and face of the franchise, Bledsoe had been relatively unscathed in his tenure as a Patriot so far, but this was his first taste of just how vicious Boston can be when you screw up as an athlete. At a certain point, it became less about how the victim was affected, and more about how the Patriots were affected.
That's disgusting!
Messier's lawsuit was eventually settled for a number estimated to be around $1.25 million. Everclear and the Paradise paid roughly $125,000 each, while Bledsoe and Lane paid around $500,000 each. Most of the payments were covered by insurance, but Scott Zolak in an interview mentioned that Max didn't have the insurance to cover payments like everyone else did. If you noticed when I was going through the breakdown of the incident earlier that I really don't have a lot from Max Lane's perspective on this. I get the sense he doesn't love talking about it, but the little I've heard him speak about it has mentioned how stupid it was and how he regrets it. He's not the only one to regret something, as in the weirdest sidetrack ever, this incident can be linked to Bledsoe missing a chance to be etched in movie history. In an interview with Rich Eisen, the Farrelly brothers revealed that the part Brett Favre played in Something About Mary was originally written for Drew Bledsoe.
He was the stud at the time for the Patriots.
Sure, and still is. Yeah. I love Bledsoe.
But he had just gotten into like a little bit of a, what was it, a little
They had the mosh pit
skirmish.
incident.
Yeah,
Remember?
okay.
Sure. He went out one night, he's a single guy, went out with his pals, and they went to a club, and he dove into a mosh pit, and I guess somebody kind of tweaked their neck.
Right.
Nothing serious, but it was in the news, and he called us up, said, I can't come do your movie in Miami, because if they found out I'm doing a movie after that, they're going to run me out of town.
I have a hard time trusting the Farrelly brothers after they decided Dumb and Dumber 2 was worth releasing. But according to Drew, there was an element of truth to the story.
And so I, got sued for that, and it was a big deal. And so the combination of the fact that I just didn't want to leave my Montana place in the summertime, and that I was just coming off of this thing that was kind of bumpy, I turned it down, and they gave it to Favre.
Yeah, Favre.
They gave it to Favre. And by the way, terrible actor, dude. I would have been way better in that role. Brett, I hope you hear this.
So Brett Favre took away Bledsoe's Super Bowl ring, his Something About Mary role, and millions of dollars from the taxpayers in Mississippi, allegedly.
Brett Favre.
As quickly as the story grew, it faded away just as fast. It comes back every now and then, occasionally being mentioned whenever Everclear plays a show in Boston. In 2000, Everclear played at Foxborough Stadium, home with the New England Patriots, as part of the WBCN River Rave. That was apparently only the second time Alexakis and Bledsoe had even talked to each other. At one point during the show, Alexakis asked fans to stop throwing coins at them before he beat them up, remarking that, "I've already been sued at Boston before, it ain't gonna happen again." The Patriots turned their season around and made the playoffs, but Bledsoe had never reached the Super Bowl as a starting quarterback again. I know I mentioned earlier about how much the Boston media loves to spin a narrative and how that's bad. Well, I'm a hypocrite, so I'm gonna do one of my own. I think this incident planted the seed for the later ascent of Tom Brady. The Patriot fan base didn't turn on him, and he played for several more years, but it was the first time that he received major pushback from the fan base. That seed, combined with a few disappointing playoff exits, blossomed in 2001 when the fan base accepted Tom Brady over him as the starting quarterback. Drew eventually did get his Super Bowl ring, albeit as a backup, and played a few more years before retiring in 2007. He doesn't shy away from that night, always joking about how stupid it was of him. Now in retirement, he can live beside the ocean, and leave the fire behind, swim out past the breakers, and watch the world die. I'm just kidding. He lives in Washington and owns a vineyard or something. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you see, please like and subscribe. And don't forget to check the description to see more of the articles and videos that help inspire this one. I just want to quickly note, I do wish I could have more information about Tamika Messier in this video, but she is a private citizen, so all the information I was able to find is just from what was reported at the time. Anyways, thanks for watching.